I never thought the person who would betray me the most would be the same one I carried in my womb, raised with love and sacrificed my whole life for. But that's exactly what happened. My name is Margaret. I'm 64 years old, and I live in a small town in Texas. What I'm about to tell you is the kind of story that makes neighbors whisper, families divide, and hearts break. My daughter, my own flesh and blood, took out a $1.2 million loan in my name. And what I did afterward, well, it shocked her in ways she never expected. The nightmare started on a sunny morning. The kind where the Texas sky is so blue it almost feels unreal. I was sitting on my porch with a cup of coffee, rocking gently in the old wooden chair my late husband built years ago. Life was simple, peaceful, until the phone rang. On the other end was a stern voice from the bank. They asked me about a property loan, $1.2 million, that I supposedly signed. My coffee nearly slipped from my hands. "Ma'am, are you aware you've defaulted on 3 payments already?" the man asked. "What are you talking about?" I stammered. "I've never taken out any loan. My house is paid off. I don't owe anyone a dime." But the man wasn't joking. He read out details: my full name, my social security number, my address. Everything matched. The only thing that didn't match was the reality of my life. I didn't sign anything. I couldn't even imagine how this was possible. That night I barely slept. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the pile of letters that had arrived in the mail. Each one was a notice: payment due, payment overdue, risk of foreclosure. My heart raced so badly I thought it might give out. Then I saw it. One letter had a photocopy of the loan agreement with my signature on it. But it wasn't my signature. Someone had forged it. My hands shook as I called my daughter, Clara. She was 32, smart, ambitious, and always had a taste for things far beyond what she could afford. I raised her after her father passed away, doing everything I could to make sure she had the best opportunities. I even worked double shifts as a nurse just to pay for her college. When Clara answered the phone, her voice was unusually cheerful, almost forced. "Hey, Mom. Everything okay?" "No, Clara. Everything is not okay," I said, my voice trembling. "I just got a call from the bank. There's a $1.2 million loan in my name. Do you know anything about this?" There was silence. Dead silence. Then a nervous laugh. "Oh, that? Mom, I was going to tell you. It's not a big deal. It's just business." "Not a big deal?" I yelled, slamming my hand on the table. "You stole my identity. You forged my name on a loan for over $1 million. How could you do this to me?" Her voice hardened. "Don't be so dramatic, Mom. It's an investment. Real estate. You wouldn't understand. It's going to pay off, and when it does, you'll thank me." I felt my knees weaken. The daughter I raised, the one I sacrificed everything for, had betrayed me in the worst way possible. But what truly broke me wasn't just the loan. It was her lack of remorse. She didn't sound sorry. She sounded entitled. That night, as I lay awake in bed, a storm rattled outside my window. Thunder shook the house, and rain poured down like the heavens were crying with me. I whispered to myself, "Why, Clara? Why would you do this to your own mother?" But as much as it hurt, I knew I couldn't just cry about it. If I didn't act, I could lose everything: my house, my savings, my future. And so, I made a decision. I would fight back. But the way I planned to fight would shock not only my daughter, but everyone who thought I was just a weak old woman from Texas. The next morning, I drove to the bank in my rusty old pickup truck. The manager, a tall man with a grave expression, laid out the papers in front of me. "Mrs. Collins," he said, "I don't know how to say this, but unless these payments are made, you could lose your home." I stared at the papers, my chest tightening. "Can you prove this is really my loan?" I asked. He sighed. "We have your signature, your ID number, and even a witness statement. It looks pretty solid." I leaned in closer. And that's when I saw it, the witness signature. My eyes widened. It was Clara's boyfriend, a slick real estate agent named Dean. He was always hanging around her, always talking about money and schemes. Suddenly, everything made sense. Clara hadn't acted alone. I left the bank with a plan forming in my head. My heart was breaking, yes, but there was something else rising inside me: fire. If Clara thought I was going to roll over and let her destroy me, she was wrong. I was going to play her game. But I would play it better. That evening, I went to see Clara face to face. She was living in a fancy downtown apartment, one I had no idea she could even afford. When she opened the door, she looked surprised to see me, but her surprise turned into irritation quickly. "Mom, what are you doing here?" she snapped. I stepped inside without asking. "I know everything, Clara. I saw the papers. I saw Dean's signature. You've ruined my life with this loan. Now tell me the truth. What are you planning?" She crossed her arms, her face cold. "I told you already. It's an investment. You'll be fine." But I noticed something then, her hands. They were trembling. And in that moment, I realized something even darker was hiding beneath her words. Something she wasn't telling me. And when I opened her living room drawer, I found something that nearly made me collapse on the floor. Inside the drawer was another set of forged documents. This time they weren't just for the loan. They were for my house. My daughter had planned to take everything I owned. Inside the drawer was another set of forged documents. This time they weren't just for the loan. They were for my house. My own home, the place where I raised her, where her father and I built a life, where every picture frame on the wall held a memory. She was trying to steal that too. My knees buckled, and I had to grip the edge of her marble counter to steady myself. "Clara," my voice cracked. "You were going to take my house? The house your father built with his bare hands?" Her face paled, but then she quickly composed herself, flipping her hair back like she always did when she wanted to look confident. "Mom, you don't get it. This is business. It's not personal." "Not personal?" I shouted, my chest burning. "You're robbing me blind, Clara. You've put my name on $1 million loan, and now you want to take my home too? How could you look me in the eye and say it's not personal?" She didn't flinch. "Because I need it. That house is equity. Dean says once we flip the properties we'll make triple. We'll all be rich. And you'll thank me later." Rich. Thank her? My head spun. The betrayal cut so deep that I could barely breathe. This wasn't just a mistake or desperation. This was greed. Pure cold greed. My own daughter saw me not as her mother, but as an asset to exploit. I walked out of her apartment with tears streaming down my face, but underneath the sorrow was a rage I had never felt before. I wasn't just fighting for money now. I was fighting for my dignity, my home, my very existence. The next day, I contacted an old friend, Frank, a retired lawyer who had once helped me with estate planning after my husband died. He owed me a favor, and when I explained everything, his voice hardened. "Margaret, this is fraud on a massive scale. But if you want to fight this, you need proof. Solid proof." "I have the forged papers," I said. "Not enough," he replied. "We need recordings. Witnesses. A trail of money. If we can tie her and Dean to this scheme, we can bring them down." For the first time, I realized what I was about to do. I wasn't just confronting my daughter. I was setting a trap for her. And as much as it shattered my heart, I knew I had no choice. That evening, I invited Clara over for dinner at my house. She showed up in a red designer dress, smiling like nothing had happened, as if we were still just mother and daughter. I forced myself to smile too, hiding the small recorder tucked beneath the tablecloth. As we ate, I gently guided the conversation. "So this loan, you're sure everything will be fine?" "Of course," she said casually, sipping her wine. "Once the buyers come through, Dean and I will pay it off. Don't stress, Mom. This is how big money works." "And the house?" I asked softly. "What about my house?" She smirked. "Don't worry about that either. Once everything's in my name, it'll just make things easier for the bank. It's not like you'll need it forever, right?" Her words sliced through me like knives. But inside I was steady. Every word was being recorded. Every slip of arrogance was going to be evidence. Over the next few weeks, I played the role of the clueless, heartbroken mother. I pretended to trust her. I let her think I was too weak, too naive to fight back. Meanwhile, Frank and I gathered everything: bank records, property documents, recordings of her and Dean bragging about their investment. But just when I thought I was in control, something happened that shook me to my core. One night, I came home to find my front door unlocked. My heart pounded as I pushed it open, and what I saw made my blood run cold. The living room was ransacked, drawers pulled out, papers scattered, and my safe cracked open. The safe that held my will, my husband's war medals, and every important paper I owned. I stumbled forward, my hands trembling, and then I saw it. Lying on the floor was a crumpled piece of paper. A copy of my will, one that had been altered. In this forged version, everything I owned, my house, my savings, even the land passed down from my parents, was left not to both my children, but solely to Clara. I nearly collapsed. It wasn't just the loan. It wasn't just the house. She was planning to erase her brother completely, to erase me, and take every last piece of my legacy. I fell to the floor, clutching that forged will, and sobbed until I could barely breathe. This wasn't just fraud anymore. This was a calculated betrayal, as if my daughter wanted to bury me alive before I was even gone. But in that moment of despair, something inside me hardened. My tears dried. My sobs turned into steady breaths. If she wanted a war, she had just declared it. The very next day, I called Frank and said 4 words I never thought I'd say in my life. Let's take her down. But I had no idea what was about to happen next. Because when I showed up at Clara's apartment to confront her with the forged will in my hands, I found something far worse than I ever imagined. She wasn't alone. Dean was there. And spread out on the table in front of them were even more papers, even more schemes, and a photograph that made my stomach twist in terror. It wasn't just me they had targeted. It was someone else too. Someone I loved. On the table, among the scattered papers and contracts, was a photograph of my son, Daniel. My baby boy, the one who had moved to Houston years ago to work as a mechanic, far from the chaos of Clara's high-rise dreams. He was the opposite of her, humble, hard-working, and honest. And yet, there he was, his picture stapled to a folder labeled insurance. I froze in the doorway, my breath caught in my chest. What is this? I whispered, though my voice came out sharper than I intended. Clara looked up, startled, her eyes wide before she quickly masked it with that cold confidence she always wore. Mom, what are you doing here? Dean, on the other hand, smirked, leaning back in his chair like a predator who had just been caught mid-hunt. Guess the cat's out of the bag. I stepped forward, clutching the forged will in my hands. Why is Daniel's picture here? What are you planning? Clara's eyes flickered with something I couldn't read. It's nothing. Don't make it dramatic. But Dean chuckled darkly. It's not nothing, Margaret. You see, your son has something we want too. Life insurance. If something were to happen to him, Clara here is the beneficiary. Isn't that right, sweetheart? The room spun. My knees nearly gave out. No, I whispered, shaking my head. You wouldn't, you couldn't. But Clara didn't deny it. She just looked at me with a face I didn't recognize anymore. Cold. Calculating. This wasn't my daughter. This was a stranger wearing her face. Something snapped inside me. I slammed the forged will down on the table. You're both sick. You've stolen my name, my house, my future. And now you want to hurt your own brother? I won't let you. I swear to God, I will burn every bridge to stop you. Dean leaned forward, his smirk gone, his voice low and threatening. Careful, Margaret. You don't know who you're messing with. This is bigger than you think. Walk away now or you might regret it. For a moment, fear gripped me so tight I could barely breathe. But then I remembered Daniel's laugh, the way he hugged me every time he visited, the grease-stained smile that reminded me of his father. No, I wasn't walking away. That night I called Daniel. My voice trembled as I told him everything. The loan, the house, the forged will, and now this sick insurance plot. He was silent for a long time before finally saying, Mom, don't worry. I'll come down this weekend. We'll face this together. For the first time in weeks I felt a flicker of hope. But that hope was short-lived. 2 days later I got a call. Daniel had been in a car accident. His truck had veered off the road outside Houston. My blood turned to ice. I rushed to the hospital, praying with every breath. When I finally saw him, battered but alive, I collapsed beside his bed, sobbing with relief. He had broken ribs, a fractured arm, but thank God he was alive. The doctors said it looked like an accident. But deep down I knew better. As I sat by his bedside, Daniel grabbed my hand, his voice weak but steady. Mom, do you think Clara? Yes, I whispered, tears burning my eyes. I think she and Dean are behind this. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just fraud anymore. This was life or death. I drove back home that night with a fire raging inside me. If they wanted a war, I would give them one. But I wouldn't fight them with fists or screams. No. I would use their own greed against them. Frank and I set the final stage of the plan. We arranged a meeting with Clara and Dean under the guise of settling things quietly. I told Clara I was willing to sign over certain assets to keep the peace. She took the bait immediately, too blinded by her hunger for money to suspect anything. The meeting was set at my house. I cleaned the living room, lit the lamps, and waited. But this time the house wasn't just my home. It was a trap. Hidden in the corners were small recording devices Frank had set up. And waiting in the shadows of the street outside was a private investigator Frank had hired, ready to document every move. When Clara and Dean arrived, they came dressed for victory. Clara in another designer dress, Dean in a sharp suit. They thought this was the moment they'd win. I sat them down, poured them coffee, and slid the forged will across the table. "You'll get what you want," I said, my voice trembling just enough to sound believable. "But I need you to promise me one thing. Daniel stays out of this." Dean smirked. "Can't promise that, Margaret. He's in the way." Clara didn't even flinch. She nodded. "It's business, Mom. You don't understand. He'll never stand down." Every word was being recorded. Every damning sentence was sealing their fate. I leaned back, tears welling in my eyes, not just for the betrayal, but for the daughter I had lost long ago. The moment was nearly perfect. But just when I thought I had them cornered, Clara leaned forward and whispered something that made my blood run cold. "You think you're clever, Mom? You think you're the one setting the trap? You don't realize we already took care of everything. You're already finished." And with that, Dean pulled out a folder and dropped it on the table. Inside were fresh documents I had never seen before. Papers that showed I had supposedly sold my land, signed away my house, and even emptied my savings. Documents dated with yesterday's date. And at the bottom of each one was my signature. I stared at those papers in disbelief, my throat closing up as if the room itself was choking me. They had gone further than I ever imagined. These weren't just plans anymore. They had executed everything, made it look airtight, and left me standing in the ruins of my own life. My signature, my handwriting, but I had never touched those papers. Clara leaned back in her chair, her voice dripping with venom. "You see, Mom? It's already over. You thought you were playing me, but you were always 10 steps behind. By the time anyone looks into this, it'll be too late. Everything you had is mine." Dean smirked, tapping his fingers on the table. "It's simple, Margaret. Either you play along quietly, or you'll lose not just your home, but your freedom too. Forgery is a serious crime. Imagine how it will look when the bank and the police see your name everywhere." For a moment my vision blurred. I felt myself sinking, drowning in despair. My own daughter was framing me for crimes she committed. My own daughter was ready to watch me rot in prison if it meant she got what she wanted. But what Clara didn't know, what Dean couldn't possibly have guessed, was that every cruel word, every threat, every proud admission was being captured. The microphones Frank had planted were still recording. The private investigator outside was still watching. And as much as my heart ached, I forced myself to play weak just a little longer. I let tears stream down my face. I reached across the table, grabbing Clara's hand. "Please," I begged, my voice shaking. "Don't do this. Don't take everything. I'm your mother." For a flicker of a moment, I thought I saw something in her eyes, hesitation, doubt, maybe even guilt. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. She pulled her hand back sharply. "You're not my mother anymore. You're an obstacle." Her words cut deeper than any knife could. Dean stood up, gathering the papers into a neat stack. "It's done, Margaret. Don't fight this. You won't win." They walked out of my house that night, confident, smug, certain they had destroyed me. But what they didn't realize was that they had destroyed themselves. The next morning I took everything, the recordings, the forged will, the documents from Clara's drawer, and the newest threats, and went straight to Frank. His eyes lit up as he listened to the tapes. "Margaret," he said, his voice firm, "this is more than enough. We're going to the police. Today." The investigation moved faster than I expected. Fraud, forgery, conspiracy, charges piled up like bricks in a wall they couldn't climb. The bank, once convinced I was the culprit, quickly turned when they heard the recordings. The private investigator's photos showed Dean and Clara handling documents, signing, scheming. Piece by piece, their empire of lies crumbled. But the most painful moment came when I had to face Clara in court. She sat just feet away from me, dressed in a plain beige suit, her face pale without the mask of arrogance she always wore. For the first time, I saw her not as my betrayer, but as the little girl I once held in my arms. My baby, now a criminal. When the verdict came, my heart cracked in two. Guilty. Both of them. Dean was sentenced to years in prison for fraud and forgery. Clara, my daughter, was led away in handcuffs. She turned to look at me one last time, her eyes burning with anger. Not remorse, not sorrow, just anger. As if I had wronged her by not letting her steal my life. I broke down right there in the courtroom. Not from victory but from grief. Because even though justice had been served, nothing could give me back the daughter I had lost. Weeks later, I sat back on my porch, rocking in the chair my husband built, sipping coffee under the wide Texas sky. The house was safe. My land was mine again. Daniel was healing, growing stronger every day. Life somehow was moving forward. But sometimes late at night I still hear her voice in my head. You're not my mother anymore. You're an obstacle. That wound will never fully heal. I raised her. I loved her. I gave her everything I could. And in the end, she chose greed over family, lies over love. What did I do that shocked her? I fought back. I didn't let her destroy me. I didn't let her bury me with forged papers and empty promises. I showed her that even a mother's heart, soft, forgiving, full of love, can turn to steel when pushed too far. And if there's one thing I've learned from this nightmare, it's this: blood may tie us together, but trust is what makes us family. And once that trust is broken, it can never be whole again. So when people in town whisper about me, about the daughter who betrayed her own mother for $1, $2 million, I don't hide from the story. I tell it. Because it's not just a story about loss and betrayal. It's a story about survival. And survival, no matter how painful, is something I refuse to let her take from me.